too. Mendelin was well aware that his brother would be angry with him, but his curiosity had complete reign of him now. Besides, it was all Achilleos' fault, truly, and Achilleos at least should have known better. There was a good 9 years difference between the surviving sons of Domedes, enough that in some ways the pair might as well have been considered other than brothers. Uldiason often acted more than Mendelin's uncle, or indeed their father. In fact, from what Mendelin could vaguely recall of his sire, combined with what Cyrus, Tavian, and a few elders had told him over the years, Uldiason could have passed for Domede's twin in both look and manner. Mendelin shared some of his brother's features, but was half a foot shorter than Uldiason, and while strengthened by the necessities of farm life, was not nearly as mighty either. His countenance was narrower and longer from his mother's side, he was told, and his eyes were black and glistened like dark jewels. From where those had come, no one in the village could say, but Mendelin had learned early on that if he stared, he could unsettle most anyone save his brother and the man now with him. "What do you make of it?" Achilleos muttered from behind. Mendelin forced his gaze from the hunter's fascinating discovery. Achilleos was a blond, wiry figure nearly as tall as Uldiason. Unlike Mendelin, who was clad virtually identically to his brother save for the darker shading of his tunic, Achilleos was dressed in a green and brown outfit consisting of jerkin and pants that allowed him to blend well with the present surroundings. He had soft leather boots designed for padding as silently through the woods as any animal. His slim frame hinted of his swiftness, but bellied his strength. Uldiason's brother had tried to string and fire the great bow that was Achilleos' pride and joy. Tried and failed. The hawk-faced archer was not just the best at his craft among Sarim's inhabitants, but at least in Mendelin's estimation, superior to many a hunter elsewhere. He had watched Achilleos match skills against veteran guards from passing caravans, and never had seen him lose. "It looks ancient," was all Mendelin could finally answer. He felt some embarrassment. Even Achilleos had noticed that. But the hunter nodded as if listening to a sage. Although more than a decade older than Mendelin, he treated the youngest son of Domedes as if Mendelin were the fount of all the world's knowledge. That was one of the few points of frustration between Achilleos and Uldiason, who saw little practical use in most of his siblings' learning, but did at least tolerate it. "The thing is," the archer ran a hand through his thick, almost leonine mane, "I've been through this area many a time, and I swear, it's never been here before." Mendelin only nodded, his attention once more upon his companion's find. Achilleos had an eye such as he could only envy, Mendelin's own vision often forcing him to peer close at parchments in order to make out the words he so cherished. And at this particular thing, he peered especially close, for the symbols etched in its face were, in many ways, worn almost clean away by weather and age. Some of them could not be made out, even if his nose had been pressed against the stone. Clearly the object before him had suffered long the effects of nature. And yet, how could that be, when it had, by Achilleos' declaration, only just appeared? Kneeling before it, Mendelin estimated the dimensions. Just over the length of his foot on each side of the square base, and, had he been standing, a hand's breadth below his knee. The flat top was roughly half the dimensions of the base. In size alone, the stone carving should have been impossible to miss seeing. He touched the ground before it. Nothing of recent change in surroundings? No. Medlin traced his fingers almost reverently around the more legible symbols. Legible only in that he could see them, not understand them. One prominent marking seemed to loop in and around itself, giving it no end. As Medlin touched it, he had a sense of incredible age. He involuntarily shook his head. Not age, old Dyson's brother thought. Agelessness. Mendelin's mind paused at that sudden notion, never having conceived it before. Agelessness. How could such a thing be possible? The stone was black, but the markings glittered as if silver. That also fascinated him, for they did not appear to have been painted so. The skill with which the entire thing had been carved bespoke of an artisan far more sophisticated than could be found in Serum, or even of the larger settlements in the entire western region. Blatantly, Medlin realized that Achilles was shaking him by the shoulder. He wondered why. What? The archer leaned warily over him, his brow furrowed deep in concern. The moment you touched it, you seemed too still. You didn't blink, and I'd swear you didn't even breathe. I did not notice. Medlin was tempted to touch the artifact again, fascinated to see if the same thing would happen. However, he suspected that Achilles would not like that. Did you touch it earlier? There was a noticeable hesitation. Then, yes. But the same thing did not happen to you, did it? Achilles' complexion went pale with memory. No. Then what? Did you feel anything? I felt an emptiness, Medlin. It reminded me of death. As the hunter, the blind man dealt with death on almost a daily basis. Usually because of the animals he killed, but occasionally because of those close scrapes with the wild boars, cats, or bears. For the time he became the prey. Yet the manner in which Achilles spoke of death now gave it a far more ominous connotation, one which oddly stirred further curiosity, not fear, in the heart of his companion. What about death? Medlin asked almost eagerly. Can you describe it? Was it... Achilles' expression, suddenly guarded, cut him off with a sharp slash of his hand. That's all. I went for you right after. Clearly there was much more involved. But old Dyson's brother did not push. Perhaps he could slowly gain the information over time. For the moment, he would satisfy himself with the stone artifact. Medlin seized a small broken branch and scraped the ground near the bottom edge. The mysterious relic appeared to be planted deep in the soil. But how far? Was there more beneath the surface than above? Again, the temptation came to touch it. This time, grabbing hold of it with both of his hands in order to see if he could move the piece at all. How much more useful it would be if Medlin could take it back to the farm, as to study it at his own leisure. Medlin's head shot up. The farm! Dyson! He leapt to his feet, startling the generally unperturbable Achilles. The stone's discovery seemed to have upset the archer in a way Medlin had never seen before. Achilles was known for his fearlessness, but now he seemed to look to Mendelin for reassurance. Certainly at first. I have to get back, he explained to the hunter. Old Dyson will be wondering where I'm at. Mendelin did not like to disappoint his older sibling, even though old Dyson would not have shown any such emotion. Nevertheless, Mendelin lived with the memories of the terrible burdens old Dyson had taken on with the sicknesses and, later, deaths of their loved ones. The younger brother felt beholden to the older for that reason, not to mention many other lesser ones. What about that? Achilles grumbled, gesturing at the stone with his brow. Do we just leave it like that? The two of them gathered loose branches and bits of leafy shrubbery. Yet although they quickly had the artifact hidden from sight, Mendelin felt as if it stood naked to the world. He considered covering it further, then decided to make do with what they had already done. The first opportunity he had to return to it, he would. As Mendelin focused on the path back, he belatedly noticed that the weather had taken an odd and very sudden turn. The day had been fairly clear and bright before, but now the clouds began to gather in earnest to the west as if in preparation for a major storm. The wind had also begun to pick up. That's odd, murmured Achilles, evidently seeing the change for the first time. Yes, it is. Old Dyson's brother did not understand the wind and weather in terms of hunting, as his companion did, but rather in measurements of currents and such. Mendelin constantly saw the aspects of farm life in such terms, and while old Dyson, who knew weather only and how it affected his crops and animals, constantly shook his head at his brother's ways. He could not deny that once in a while, Mendelin had come up with some idea that had helped ease their tasks a bit. The clouds rapidly thickened. Mendelin said nothing more to Achilles about the strange weather, but at one point, when the archer moved a step ahead, old Dyson's brother glanced back in the direction of the stone. Glanced back and wondered. Old Dyson, too, noticed the peculiar shift in the weather, but chalked it up to one of those quirks of nature to which a farmer had grown accustomed. He hoped that Mendelin would return soon from wherever Achilles had dragged him. Even then, it was likely that the two brothers would have to make part of the journey home in the rain. The sudden accumulation above hinted of a particularly powerful storm brewing, but old Dyson hoped that perhaps it would hold for the time before unleashing its full force. If he and Mendelin could make it at least past the low fork, where the trail often flooded, then they would be alright the rest of the way. Hands clutching the reins, he sat on the wagon, eyeing the direction in which Serentheta had indicated the pair had gone. Both Mendelin and Achilles surely had sense enough to see what he did and react properly. At least Achilles did. As he waited, his mind drifted back to the face framed in gold. Even though old Dyson had seen her only 2 brief times, he knew that he would not soon forget the vision of her. It had been due to not merely her beauty, memorable enough by itself, but the manner in which she had talked and acted. There had been something about the noble woman that instinctively made old Dyson want to protect her as he had no other, not even his brother at the time of their family's deaths. Lila. The farmer ran the name over and over in his thoughts, savoring the almost musical beauty of it. The sky rumbled, finally jarring him back to the present. Recalling Mandolin, old Dyson stood up in the hope of getting a better view. Surely the two had to almost be back at the serum by now. A flash of green caught his attention, but not the green that made a part of the hunter's woodland garments. Rather, it was an emerald green that instantly caused old Dyson to jolt to attention. His brother and friend utterly forgotten. Lila slowly strode into the woods beyond, leaving the safety of the village. From her passive expression, it seemed very likely that she did not even notice the potential threat from the sky. In this region, the storms could suddenly grow so vicious as to uproot trees without warning. Leaping down, old Dyson secured the wagon, then headed after her. Although the farmer mostly ran after her all out of concern, excitement also filled him. He had no illusions about his chances with one of her blood, but at the same time, his heart pounded at the thought of at least speaking with the noble woman again. Old Dyson caught sight of her again just as the wind doubled. Despite the worsening conditionings, Lila still appeared not to notice. Her lips were pursed, and her gaze was fixed groundward. Despite the swift pace old Dyson kept, he did not manage to catch up to her until well into the woods. The towering farmer started to reach out a meaty hand, then thought better of it. He did not want to take any chance of frightening her any more than he had to. Whatever weighed on her thoughts clearly weighed heavily. Seeing no other option, old Dyson cleared his throat. Lila straightened sharp. He looked behind her. It's just you. Forgive me, my lady. A shy smile immediately came to her lips. I told you. To you, I'm Lila. What I once was, I can never be again. As his expression turned to one of confusion, she added, But what do I call you, Sir Farmer? He had not realized that he had not ever introduced himself. I am old Dyson, son of the Meads. A rattle of thunder reminded him of their current circumstances. Lila should be out here. There's what seems to be a fierce storm brewing. Best you seek shelter, likely in the tavern. It's one of the strongest buildings of Sarum. A storm? She glanced skyward, and for the first time appeared to register the change. The clouds had thickened to the point that day had almost turned to light. Daring her disdain, he finally took hold of Lila by the wrist. There doesn't seem to be much time. But Lila instead turned for gaze in another direction, and a breath later let out a small gasp. Old Dyson followed her eyes, but saw nothing. Nonetheless, the noble woman stood frozen, as if whatever had caught her attention shocked her senseless. Lila, what is it? I thought, but no. Even when he stood next to her, the farmer could see no cause for her alarm. Where is it? What did you see? There! She pointed at a particularly dense area of the woods. I think... He was tempted to simply take her back to Sarum and return after the storm. But the intensity of her reaction made him worry about what lay out there. Mandolin suddenly came to mind. Mandolin, who was still missing. Stay here. Old Dyson started forward, at the same time drawing his knife. The brush thickened, and at times the wild grass rose as high as his waist. But Lila had seen anything was beyond him, but he trusted that this was no wild goose chase. Then, as he neared the area in question, old Dyson's hackles rose. A sense of dread rushed over him, nearly causing the stalwart farmer to backtrack. A faint but sickly scent wafted under his nose. It brought back memories of the plague, of his family. Old Dyson did not want to take another step closer, yet, as he did, the sight before him made the farmer fall to one knee. It was all he could do to keep his last meal in his stomach. His knife slipped from his hand, utterly forgotten in the face of the horrific revelation before him. What had been once a man, at least from the height, old Dyson decided, it must be so, lay strewn across the patch of ground at the base of the first trees. His entire torso had been expertly sliced open, much the way the farmer would have done to a cow after slaughter. Blood soaked everything in the immediate vicinity, and had turned the dirt in some places to crimson mud. A part of the victim's own stomach had poured out of the cut, and flies already clustered over the tremendous stench-ridden bounty. As if cutting open the body had not been terrible enough, the throat had been slit open sideways, the gap large enough to admit a fist. The face was covered with blood from the wounds, and leaves and other refuse decorated it like some bizarre festival display. After a long study, old Dyson finally determined that he did not know the man, who was roughly his age, and with black hair now caked with gore. It was what remained of the shredded garments that finally identified the unfortunate figure for the son of Domides. The robe's coloring alone was sufficient in itself, but the symbol of the missionary's order left no doubt whatsoever. Old Dyson had found Brother Gallico, the missing acolyte from the Triune. A gasp from behind startled him. He spun around to see Lila, eyes wide, taking in the awful sight. She suddenly went pale, eyes fluttered upwards, showing only whites, and then she began to fall. Pushing himself to his feet, old Dyson managed to catch her just before she could strike the ground. He held her prone body for a moment, at a loss what to do. Someone had to be told about the murder, likely Captain Tiberius, chief of the Saran Guard. Darius, the village leader, would also need to know. In his arms, the noblewoman moaned. Old Dyson decided that, first, he had to take care of Lila. Fortunately, it took little effort for the towering farmer to carry her. Old Dyson moved at as swift as a pace as he could without risking his precious burden. He had to watch his footing at all times, fearful that one false step would send both of them crashing. It was with great relief that old Dyson reached the edge of the village. The sky continued to thunder loudly, but the storm so far held back. Old Dyson! He stumbled at the sound of his name, nearly tossing Lila away in the process. The farmer managed to steady himself, then looked to the source of the call. A great fear lifted off his chest as Mendon and the Chilios came rushing up to him. They had clearly just arrived themselves. Mendon was slightly out of breath, and the Chilios had a pale expression that the elder son of Domit suspected mirrored his own, even though the Chilios could not yet know about the grisly discovery. As the pair came up to him, he immediately growled, "There's a body in the wood behind me, near where the forest first thickens." Eyeing the farmer's burden, the hunter nodded. "An accident?" "No." Achilles grimly nodded. He pulled a bolt from the quiver, notched the bow, and without hesitation went on in the direction old Dyson had indicated. "What of her?" Mendon asked. "Who is she? Is she harmed in any way? She fainted. Old Dyson felt unusually anxious. He kept hoping that Lila would awaken, but she remained a limp bundle in his arms. She saw the body too. Should we take her to Jarilla? Jarilla was Serum's healer woman. An elderly figure, some believed half-witch, but who was respected by all for her skills. It was she who had given the brothers the herbal mixtures that had at least eased some of their stricken family's agony. To both Old Dyson and Medlin, she had done far more than all the prayers combined. Old Dyson shook his head. She just needs rest. She must have a room at the Boar's Head. He hesitated. We can't bring her through the front door like this. There's a back way near the steps leading to the upper rooms. Medlin said with far more calm than the situation would have warranted for most other people. You can just take her through there while I go and speak quietly with Tibian in order to find which one is hers. His brother's suggestion made perfect sense. Old Dyson exhaled gratefully. We'll do that. Medlin studied him for a moment, perhaps reading deeper into his brother than Old Dyson preferred. As far as the younger son of Demetre was concerned, Lila was a perfect stranger, yet clearly she was not so with Old Dyson. Rather than explain all now, Old Dyson hurried on. A moment later, Medlin caught up. They spoke no more, intent on their efforts. Owing to the inclement shift in the weather, they were not hindered by any startled passer-by. That both pleased and frustrated Old Dyson, who wanted Lila safely in her room, but also wanted to let someone of authority know about the acolyte's heinous slaughter. He finally satisfied himself with the knowledge that Achilles would certainly contact the guard or the headman. Medlin left him as the pair neared the Boar's Head. Slipping around the back, Old Dyson found the other doorway. With some manipulation, he managed to get the noblewoman inside without losing his grip on her once. Inside, he wasted no time, heading up the wooden staircase. Fortunately, most eyes in the tavern section had turned to his brother, who had apparently timed his entrance in coincidence with Old Dyson's. As Old Dyson raced up, he heard Medlin greet a couple of those seated with a slightly louder than average voice. At the top, he waited. After what seemed an eternity, his younger brother finally joined them. She had no quarters, Medlin explained, so I had to arrange for some, with our credit. Was that alright? Old Dyson nodded. He looked at the 5 doors. Which? This one, his sibling replied, pointing at a lone door farther from the rest. It's more private. With a look of grim approval, Old Dyson had Medlin open the way for him. This being Serum, the room was fairly austere. Other than a framed bed with a down comforter and a table and a chair near the single window, there was no furniture. There were hooks on the wall for cloaks and such, and a space for a traveler's bag or trunk. Medlin noted the last before Old Dyson could say anything. She must have belongings in the caravan. Should I go to Serenthina and take care of it? While he hated involving Cyrus's daughter in the situation, Old Dyson could see no other choice. Go ahead. Medlin paused at the door, meeting his brother's gaze. He asked, How do you know this woman? We met, by chance, was all Old Dyson would return after a moment. Medlin finally nodded and left the room, gently placing the noblewoman on the bed. The farmer paused to look at her. Again, he was struck by the perfection of her face, and wondered what could have sent her wandering alone in the world. Certainly Lila could have found a good marriage with many a wealthy noble, Was she related by blood, perhaps, to one of the losing mage clans? That might explain the matter. As he pondered this, her eyes abruptly opened. Gasping, Lila bolted into a sitting position. What happened? Do you remember the woods? Her hand went to her mouth as she stifled another gasp. It was all true then. What I saw? Old Dyson nodded. And you brought me here. Where is here? The Boar's Head. It's the only inn in Sarah, Miss Lila. We thought you likely had a room here. But I do not. He shrugged. My brother took care of that. We went and brought you up here after that. Mandolin went to retrieve your things from the caravan. She stared long and hard into his eyes. Mandolin? And your brother? They're the same person, I gather. Yes. The noblewoman nodded to herself and asked, And the body? A friend is looking into it. He can be trusted to deal with the matter properly. A chilice will alert the guard, then our head man. Lila drew her knees up to her chin, then hugged her legs. As she badly wrinkled her elegant gown, she did not even seem to care. Was the man we found also a friend of yours? Him? Old Dyson shook his head. Damn missionary from the Temple of the Triune. His companions were looking for him earlier. He considered. They came with the caravan. Did you? I saw them. Yes, but never spoke. I have little trust in their teachings. Or that of the cathedral, for that matter. This admission, so near to his own thoughts concerning the two sects, inexplicably lightened old Dyson's heart. Then the farmer quickly berated himself. However much his calling repelled old Dyson, the man had not deserved such a monstrous end. Thinking of that, old Dyson knew that he had to go and see to the situation. As the one who had initially come across the dead missionary, it behooved him to tell the village officials what he knew. His brow arched as he considered the noblewoman. He would avoid speaking of Lila as much as possible. She had already been through too much. I want you to stay here, he commanded, inwardly stunned that he should talk to a lady of high caste so. Just stay here and rest. I have to see to those who'll deal with the body. You needn't come. But I should be there. Should I not? Only if necessary. You merely saw what I saw. After all, you didn't know him either. She said nothing more, but old Dyson had the clear impression that Lila knew that he risked his reputation by protecting herself. The noblewoman leaned back on the bed. Very well, if that is what you wish, I will wait until I hear from you. Good. He started for the door, already formulating his explanation. Dyson? He looked at her. Thank you. Face flushing, the farmer exited. Despite his size, he moved silently down the steps. At the bottom, he glanced into the tavern. Everyone he saw acted as if nothing was wrong, which meant the news of the corpse had not yet filled the tavern inside. Achilleos could be thanked for that discretion. Serum would be in shock soon enough. The last murder having taken place more than 4 years ago, and that due to a drunken altercation between old Arneas and his stepson, Gemmel, over farming rights, with the latter coming out the loser. Once sober, Arneas had pleaded his guilt, and had been driven off by wagon to the great city to dutifully pay for his deeds. But the butchery old Diason had witnessed had not been due to strong drink. This looked more the work of a madman or a beast. Surely an outsider. Some brigand passing through the region. Growing more certain of this with each breath, old Dyson vowed to bring it up the moment that he spoke with the headman and the guard commander. The men of Serum would be more than willing to volunteer to search the area for the bastard. This time, the crime would be handled locally. A good strong rope would end the matter as it should. It was all such a fiend deserved. Old Dyson retreated into the doorway, startled. Before him stood Tiberius, a beefy man against whom the farmer had wrestled during festival events and lost to more than he had won. The gray-haired Vulpine Dorios, who was staring at old Dyson as if never seen him before. Behind them stood more than a dozen other men, most of them from the guard, but also Achilleos. And the other 2 acolytes from the temple. The older male was, in fact, the one who had spoken, and now stood pointing accusingly at the perplexed farmer. Recovering, he looked at the hunter. "Did you tell them everything?" Before Achilleos could answer, Dorius interjected. "You're not to speak with him, hunter. Not yet. Not until all facts are to be known." "The facts are known," declared the Triune's emissary. His female companion nodded over and over as he spoke. At the moment, there seemed to be nothing pious or peaceful about the pointing figure. "You are the one responsible. Your own words brand you. Confess for the sake of your soul." Old Dyson fought to keep his distaste for the acolyte from overcoming his reason. If he understood the man correctly, then the farmer had just been accused of the very murder he'd been trying to warn them about. "Me? You think I did it? By the stars! I should take you in..." "Well, Dyson," murmured Achilleos anxiously. Son of Domedes regained control. To the archer he said, "Achilleos, I told you where to find the body. You saw my expression in..." He halted, not wishing to draw in Lila. "You know me, Dorius. You're friends with my father. I swear by his grave that I am not the fiend who so foully slew this jabbering fool's comrade." He would have gone on, but the headman waved him silent, his expression stern. Dorius replied, "'Tis not him we speak about at the moment, old Dyson. Nay, we speak of the other, though it very well might have been that we'll need to be returning to that before as long, as I don't believe in no coincidence." "Other? What other?" Captain Tiberius snapped his fingers instantly. Half a dozen men whom old Dyson had known from childhood on, moved to surround the farmer. Achilleos tried to intercede. "Dorius, is this necessary? This is old Dyson." "Your words respected, young Achilleos. This is duty." The headman nodded to the man in the circle. "I'm certain that it'll all be working out. Old Dyson, just let us do what the situation demands." "But for what?" "For possibly murdering a man," grunted Captain Tiberius, one hand on the sword at his side. Old Dyson had seen the guard commander carry the weapon only a few times in all the years he had known him. But with all one of those bearing for the aforementioned festivals. The other special events, the lone exception, had involved the murder of Gamble. Shaking his head, the farmer roared, "But I told you! I didn't slay his companion! 'Tis not him we're talking about," Dorius declared. "But it's one of a similar calling. Which makes this worse, young old Dyson. It's the one hailing from the Cathedral of Light who's been found slain." The one? Old Dyson trailed off, his thoughts in turmoil. "But I just spoke to the man a short time ago. Less than an hour, if a half that. Spoke to the man. And threatened him in the process before several witnesses." "Ah, you recall him, I see." "Yes, young old Dyson. The honored emissary of the cathedral was found with his throat cut open. And 'tis your knife jutting out of the gap made."